Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Hadas Kasorla. She is a former CISO for M1 Finance and current free agent. Welcome, Hadas.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Sure. When I was 7, I wanted to be an actress or a lawyer. And I started pursuing acting. And then when I got out of high school, I went to college. And then I was like, no, actually, I want to make money. So I joined the Army because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I learned computing, and I was a system administrator. And I know this is a long story. It feels like a long story. Anyway, after I got out of the Army, I was just doing IT stuff, anything from sysadmin to business analyst to project management, program management, et cetera. And all that while I was getting my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and my law degree. And then I practiced law for 2 years and hated every single minute of it. So I quit practicing law and went back to IT because I always loved it. And it was just a nice culmination of all the things, including the acting, by the way, that I had done in my background that kind of landed me into putting together security programs. And I've been doing that now for 14-ish years, leading mostly in the startup to scale up space, some seed companies also, just helping them get their security maturity going.
Very cool. So, you started in IT, as I think many people that are, have been in security for a while. There's, I think, a change in the industry where there's some folks now looking to jump straight into security without having that IT background. So maybe we can kind of talk about that here moving forward. Got to ask you the question I ask everybody to kind of start is, do you believe that the talent gap in security is a real thing? And if so, what do you think it looks like?
I guess it depends on how you define talent gap, which I'm sorry, but as a recovering attorney, I'm going to answer every question with it depends. I've been trained. If you're saying that there aren't enough people to fill the roles, I don't think that's true. If you're saying that people aren't quite up to speed with what they need for the roles, I think that's semi-true. I think the problem is that there's a lack of understanding in a lot of businesses as to what they actually need. I also think that there's, security. When I took the CISSP, I was told that it's a mile long and an inch deep. And I think that's very true. Security is also a mile long and also can be a mile deep. So each different domain within the security sphere and cybersecurity sphere can go very deep, and people are just hiring like security architect and expect somebody with that title to be able to do AppSec, OPSEC, ITSec, like everything. And I think that if we as leaders, security leaders, can help companies really define what they need for the moment, for their critical posture needs, and we're more succinct with what we're trying to aim for and trying to bring in, then we can help alleviate some of that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. There's, I think, often a lack of definition when it comes to roles. Job titles, as you had alluded to, are so different from one company to another. One person's security architect at one company could be what another company would call a security engineer or even an analyst. These words do mean things, but in practice, depending on the org structure, the job titles get jumbled, never mind all the responsibilities. There's so many things that go into a single role that defining each one, I think, to start is so
And it's all over the place. And I actually think that companies who don't have anybody in that security position right now should actually reach out to companies that do placement and consulting for placement to help them really define those roles. Because I recently saw a posting for penetration tester / vCISO, virtual CISO. And I'm like, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. It could be a thing. It could be somebody who's done penetration testing in their past is now doing virtual CISO work and can do both of those things for you. But if you're looking for a penetration tester, that's one thing. And if you're looking for a virtual CISO, that's another thing. So, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of problems with, and even within the industry, I've seen posts from CISOs that are like looking for AppSec, and it's not AppSec, it's everything. It's like, okay, I get you need heads and you need somebody in seats, but I think that the clearer we define what what functionality and what essential skills are needed within the role, the better, the less mushy this will be. But I also think like part of me is leaning towards that we in the security industry can do much more with much less than we believe. And if we're looking for OPSEC, if we lean into our DevOps group within our company and teach them how to deliver some OPSEC, and maybe have somebody within our department who is like the SME in that, who can then guide DevOps on how to deliver that security and can then be, I believe in delivering security as a service to the company, but everybody in the company needs to be doing security. And I think that the more we kind of push out security practice to the business, that can also help alleviate the talent gap or the perceived talent gap.
Yeah, and I think often the talent gap, as you said, is kind of amorphous and hard to define, and it depends on how you look at it. But a large driver of whatever the talent gap is mismanaged expectations. And like you said, companies just trying to throw everything into a single job description. They know this, maybe it's their first security hire. So this security engineer has to know all those various, subdisciplines of security, when I think looking at the time horizon for certain initiatives is super important. So you need to start with and prioritize what you need to have done in the first 60, 90 days. And that's maybe the core skill set that person needs to have. And then from there, you can either outsource things, work with an MSSP.
So much. Yes. And like the need for an internal SOC for most companies is overblown. I think, I think most companies can do with an MSSP for their SOC. It depends on what you do and what kind of data you have and how big you are and how much money you have, and also how much runway you have for the people you hire, because most people don't want to work in a SOC as an analyst for the rest of their lives. So you need to have growth opportunities for them. And that's super duper hard to manage. And I think that if you can bring that in as a managed service, like that's going to alleviate a lot of the turnover. It's going to alleviate a lot of the expense. And it's that company is then an expert for you, which I think is also helpful.
Yeah, you mentioned a good point there about not having to deal with the turnover in a SOC. From level 1 to level 3, somewhere in there, the turnover is immensely high. The whole alert fatigue thing is a very real thing from what I hear. I haven't, looked at alerts myself, but apparently that is a problem. And you could make the argument that, automation is the wave of the future there. In which case, what happens to all the analyst roles that are entry level, those folks that we need to hire. But yeah, if you don't have to take on all of that extra cost and turnover, and you can just outsource that, that's a huge headache lifted. I run a small recruiting firm myself, and I outsource almost everything. I need to be able to focus on my core competencies as a recruiter, and same thing for security people. If you're not good at something, don't try and take it on yourself unless you absolutely have to. And there's always going to be a ramp up time.
And there's also like, how long do you need that for? Is it something that you need to build and then it's good or good enough that the people you have can take it? So you really only need somebody for 6 months, or is this a long-term, ever changing role? I think alert fatigue is kind of an overused term. Yes, it's alert fatigue, but it's not really alert fatigue. It's boredom. So when you have somebody who's brand new in security, they're excited to do everything. They're like, oh yes, alerts, these are exciting. I'll never get tired of these. But they get tired of them not because not because it's constant and not because it's because, oh, I've seen this kind of alert before. I already know how to figure this out. And we as human beings are constantly interested in everybody's like, oh, everybody hates change, but that's not really true. Everybody really loves learning new things and adapting and puzzle solving and problem solving. And I think that that's the issue with the SOC turnover is like, once you figure it out, you're like, okay, but now I need a challenge in my life. And so, yeah, I think automation has a place in that. But I also think that there'll always be a little bit of a human element in there to make sure that the automation's working. And if you can find that balance of like, okay, you always have to do some boring stuff in your job. Everybody has to do some boring stuff in their job. Like if I have to write another policy, and I will have to write another policy, I will scream. But I'll scream privately in my house office because I hate policy writing. But it's part of my job. But it's such a small part of my job that like I can get excited about the rest of the stuff. And if you can do that with your analysts, if you can be like, yes, you're going to have alerts. We've automated a lot of it. You're really going to just be checking that the computers are doing what they need to be doing. And then also we have these exciting new challenges for you. Then you can minimize that turnover at your work or, outsource.
Yeah, for sure. I think you could kind of just boil that down to novelty is important to humans from a psychological standpoint. We get a hit of dopamine when we encounter something that's unexpected or not regular. So I was actually listening to a podcast a couple of days ago where they were talking about the psychology of slot machines and gambling. And B.F. Skinner, I guess, did some research on rats, and they would actually, instead of taking the tried and true lever that would give them a little bit of food every time, they would
they'd get the zap.
Yeah, well, they would press the lever for the food that was a larger amount but less often. So if they had pressed the lever with the smaller amount, they'd get more food overall. But they actually were tuned to hit the lever with the larger amounts less often. Yeah.
Well, also he did studies that showed, this is the novelty thing. He did studies that showed that you could either give a rat a bunch of cocaine and they'd keep getting it, whatever, or if they got to choose between that and like one that randomly zaps them, they would eventually choose the one that randomly zaps them because they'd be like, oh, this is novel. This is weird. This is, something different to stimulate me as opposed to just this cocaine I'm doing.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize when they're looking at retention for their people, they think it's about, money or, in some cases about the management. But in a lot of cases, it's just because people get bored, especially very motivated individuals that are smart. They need something to keep them intellectually stimulated. And you can offer that even if the majority of their job is, looking at alerts all day. You can have them do special projects and contribute. And I think a lot of that goes back to just listening to people.
I always had the highest retention, not retention, engagement, also retention. But I didn't have the highest retention. I don't really know what those numbers are. But what I'm trying to say is I always had the highest engagement with my people. And one of the things that I did is at the beginning of the new year, and that was just because it's easy to be a marker at that point, I would make each of them tell me 3 goals they have. One is a personal goal. They didn't have to tell me what the personal goal was, but they had to have one. One was a professional goal for themselves, like I want to get to this level or whatever. And then the final goal that they had to have was one for the company that they could implement, that they had control over. So like, I want M1 to achieve blah, blah, blah by the end of the year. And they know that they can help do that. And then we'd go through each goal and we'd say, okay, what are 3 habits you can set for each goal that you can do either weekly or monthly, but I'd prefer daily, weekly, or monthly, but I'd prefer no more than weekly, really, just so that it really becomes a habit to help you reach those goals. And we would set these goals and then I would check in with them on one-on-ones, like, how are you doing with your habits? And how are you doing actually reaching those goals? Because realistically, setting habits is more important than setting goals. And if you set a habit but don't reach the goal, you still feel like you're accomplished because you've changed your behavior and gotten somewhere else, perhaps. Whereas if you set a goal, once you reach it, it's actually kind of deflating. It's the achieving to the goal that is more exciting. And I think everybody should read Atomic Habits, by the way. That is where I learned how to do all that stuff. But because of that, even though, we had a limited learning and development budget, we had one, but it was limited. And even though, we had a very small team. So there was also like, there was a ceiling to growth at the last place I was at. They still felt like they were growing because we made sure that as they had personal growth, that they had professional growth, and that they could see the impact of the work that they were doing within the company. And so they felt really engaged and wanted to stay there. And one of the other things that I did is at every one-on-one, or one of the things that I do at every one-on-one is, maybe not every one-on-one, but on regular one-on-ones, is say, what is something that you're absolutely loving that you're working on? And what's something that you hate working on? Because usually when I ask what's something you hate working on, it's something that we can figure out how to automate, or it's something that we can figure out how to get a consultant to do or a contractor to do, something. But or it's something that it can be like, okay, well, let's drive through it, get it finished, and then you don't have to work on it anymore.
That's a great approach. And you mentioned goal setting, which is extremely important. Obviously, people need to have something to drive towards. Are you familiar with the concept of the zone of proximal development?
No, what is that?
Basically, it's the idea that when we have goals that require us to stretch beyond our current capacity to do something, but not stretch too far, that's the ideal goal. So it's attainable, but it's still a little bit of a stretch goal. That's when you actually get the best out of people. The way most people know the zone of proximal development is baby talk. We talk to babies like one step above their current level of understanding, basically, and that's how they stretch their ability to learn language.
Well, I will say that I do know about the zone of proximal development, but I didn't realize there was a term for that. But that is something I do when we talk about our goals, is talk about like how realistic is achieving this within this time frame, either 6 months or a year, because I want them to feel successful. I don't want them to like reach for a goal. It's okay if you fail reaching for a goal as long as you get pretty close, but I don't want them to reach for a goal. Like if my junior AppSec engineer is like, I want to be a CISO by the end of the year. I'm like, okay, well, let's rein that in a little. Like, we'll get you there, not in a year. We'll get you there if that's what you really want. But what can we do to actually develop you towards that goal that you can finish within the next 6 months, and then reassess and get to that next step the 6 months afterwards? So,
yeah, excellent approach. What about career planning and succession planning and stuff like that? Did you have a structured way of doing that? Like, you spend X amount of time in this role before you make it to that role. That's the way the consulting firms have always done it. I've never been a huge fan, but like,
I'm not a fan of that. Yeah. That's one of the things that is really good about having actually a small team, is that there's actually a lot less structure to career planning. So several things that I did was make sure that within the team there was a lot of crossover knowledge, because the CloudSec engineer and the AppSec engineer kind of had to work together, but also didn't really have domain expertise of each other's things. And so I wanted them to be able to learn from each other, and so that they'd know whether, oh, well, maybe I'm interested in more CloudSec than I am in AppSec, or whatever, things like that. I would also have all of my employees really work within the engineering team, the rest of the engineering team, and work with them hand in hand, hand in glove, so that they could learn other aspects of engineering. But when I look at how I got to where I am, there was never like, and one of the reasons I gave you my background by being like, I always wanted to be an actress or a lawyer, is because like one of the interview questions a lot of people ask is like, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? Or where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? I don't know. Like, I just keep walking down the path, and I see an open door, and I look through it, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And then I walk through it, or I look through it and I'm like, oh, I don't think I want that. And I keep walking down the path. And so I think that career planning should be strong beliefs loosely held, right? Where it's like, oh, I want to be a CISO. It's like, okay, well, let's, as an example, okay, well, let's get you some knowledge that expands where you're at right now. And if anything interests you on that expanded knowledge, follow that path. Because the greater path is always there. But follow that path and go down that rabbit hole and learn as much as you can about this particular thing. And then if you get bored, come back to me and we'll take a different tact. But there's never like, I just don't want, I don't want people to feel pigeonholed. I'm talking too much. I don't want people to feel pigeonholed by saying, oh, I want to be a director. And then it's like, okay, now you're a director and good luck. Goodbye. You know?
Well, I think it's important to understand the why of these things too. Some people may say, I want to be that director just because I know it pays more than what I'm currently making, and if that's the case, there's other routes you can go. You don't have to be a director.
Yeah. And honestly, director doesn't really pay more than engineers. So, stay on the engineering path if it's for money. But I also think like people think they want to be a manager or a director because they hear that title. And it's like, this is a totally different skill. Like I was in a Reddit group of women CISOs, I think is what it was, answering questions. And there, for the most part, it was very respectful, but there were a few people who were just like really kind of acerbic about some of our technological prowess, right? Like I know technology. I'm not a technologist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not the hands-on keyboard person. You wouldn't want that, right? I understand technology and I understand, and I've done coding, but that's not what I do for a living anymore. And there was a particular person who was actually quite strident and a little aggressive about how we don't belong in these roles because we can't be engineers. And my response is that just makes it clear to me that you don't really understand what a CISO does. I can be an engineer who's a CISO, but there are so many other things that I need to do. I need to understand strategy. I need to understand finances. I need to understand leadership. I need to understand how to manage people. And managing people isn't just telling them what work to do. And in fact, it's very little of that. It's more helping them grow and being supportive of them. And so, some people think that they want to be a manager because it's like, I'm in charge. It's like, that's not really what management is. It's a totally different skill set. So also, some people think they don't want to be a manager. And then you put them into like a leadership position and you're like, oh, you think you don't want to be a manager, but actually you need to be a manager. And I actually had that at M1. And it was just like, you think management is just telling people what to do, but really it's helping people succeed. And you're just innately good at that. And let me help you find the success in there.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of the distinction between management and leadership. People think of management as very top-down, sort of authoritarian, but you could make the argument that, good leadership, and which may lead into management of people, or management might be a sub-function of leadership, but good leaders don't necessarily have that, top-down view of leading people. A lot of people are there in the trenches with the people that they manage, and making sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about making sure that people are engaged and feel challenged. To me, I'm less engaged when somebody tells me what to do than I am when somebody hands me a problem and asks me to solve it. And so I look at my role as a CISO as being somebody who translates the desires and strategies of the business to my teams so that they can then take the reins, understand what the priorities of the business are, and determine how to get there the quickest within their center of excellence. And if I do that well, then I don't have to tell anybody what to do, because they already understand what impact they can have on the company and how to employ their expertise to ensure that the company is successful and meets its goals.
Yeah, so it would seem important in that case that you would really need to understand what people's strengths are and what problems they're capable of tackling, and have an idea of maybe how they might go about that based on their personality and what their strengths are. Do you have a structured way of identifying strengths and weaknesses with your employees, or is it kind of more of an art than a science?
Oh, that's a really good question. Do I have a structured way? I don't think I do. I think it's really just, I guess, let me think about that. I think that the way I do that is by having really good conversations with them in our one-on-ones and making sure that they are engaged and finding out what they hate to do and what they love to do, and just kind of sussing it out through that. I really let my employees drive their growth. And if they're at a loss as to what to do, I will give them challenging work to do and see whether they enjoy it or not. So I guess it's both an art and a science. But sometimes people think they want a thing. I mean, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 7 years old, and then I got it and I was like, this sucks. So, the other thing I do is make sure that everybody knows that failure is a positive thing, especially if you recognize your failure swiftly and raise your hand and say, hey, I'm failing, please come help me. That it is the path to success. And me being a lawyer is a great example. Like, that was a failure. I was a failure as a lawyer. Thank you. But it got me where I am today, which I love. It definitely gave me skills that I needed. And it wasn't the wrong path. It was a step on a different path than I thought I was on.
Yeah, and I think career trajectories, we have this idea in our mind that it should be kind of a line like this, straight up and over, but it never really is. How do you, I don't know, I guess, how do you readjust when you had all your eggs in that basket and all of a sudden it switched on a dime for you? Do you have any best practices there?
Yeah, don't be afraid. I know that that's easier to say than it is to do. I'm going to tell you the story. I was a lawyer for 2 years, and my boyfriend and I, his brother lives in Denver or near Denver, and we were runners at the time, like big runners at the time. So we went to the Boulder, which is Memorial Day run. It's a 10K run in Boulder, and as you are running through Boulder, you're running through neighborhoods, and people from their houses have like bacon and they like hand it out, or donuts, and you're like running this 10K. And it was, at the time, this pre-pandemic, I don't know what's going on anymore, but pre-pandemic, it was the third largest attended 10K in the world. So I lived at sea level, and we flew to Boulder to go run this 10K with his brother, and we'd finished the 10K, and I was exhausted, and I'm laying on his brother's couch, and I was just like, I'm exhausted. And my boyfriend's like, yeah, well, you just ran a 10K. I was like, yeah, I ran a 10K, and there's, 5,000 feet elevation, and we just traveled, and all of that's true, but that's not why I'm exhausted. I hate my job. And Andy, that's my boyfriend, Andy looks at me and he goes, well, quit. And I like sat bolt upright, and I was like, what? He's like, quit. And I was like, I can't quit. I have school loans to pay back. And he looks at me and he goes, and you'll pay them back. And I was like, well, of course I will. And the next day we flew home, and I fired all my clients, found them new attorneys, and just quit without any knowledge of what I was going to do next. I was going to go back to IT. That's all I knew. And it worked out. And it was this weird, obvious answer of like, you don't have to suffer through your life. Like, you will find a solution, and you might not know what it is, but if you're standing still, you're not going to see the doors that are open on this path. You have to start walking down the path and find the open doors. And so my suggestion to people is, if you hate what you're doing and you've really, really tried it, don't be afraid to just raise your hand and be like, I can't do this anymore. And even internally in your company, go to your manager and be like, I hate this. Because your company's constantly hiring people and it's not necessarily in your group. And if you like what the company does or who the company is, they'll find someplace else for you. But you don't have to hate your life or your career. You just don't have to.
Yeah, I agree. I've had quite a few pivots in my career. I sold cars for a while and it kind of fell into recruiting. It just kind
Do
of.
you miss that? Do you miss selling cars?
Oh, not at all. No, it was a hard sale, and I'm not a hard sales guy. So, yeah, to anybody who does it day to day, congrats. You're a different, stronger person than I am, I suppose. But I guess, obviously those are big life changes that you went through, and you just kind of jumped into it. How would you? I could see a scenario where somebody might take that same leap of faith, so to speak, and maybe it didn't work out for them. How do you ensure that that's not going to happen when you take that giant jump?
You don't. There's no way to ensure that. But I will say this. Everything I've failed at or didn't pursue after attempting, I still gained so much from the attempt that helped me find my passion. So with with my career as a lawyer, I learned how business works. I learned how contracts are written. I learned how to read regulations and really understand them, and also how to negotiate them. These are all aspects of being a CISO that you need, right? I just think that like the skills you learn in life are fungible. And you can translate them to other careers. So it's okay to try something. Even acting helped me, and I also do improv as a side hobby and manage theater. I volunteer as a manager for local improv theater. And even that's helped me in my career. One of the things we learn in improv is that failure is fun and can create new opportunities within scenes. And we take failure bows and congratulate each other when we fail, because it's the only way to get past like this perfection, like stronghold that you have over your life. And you can't guarantee success. You'll never guarantee success, but it's okay if you really sincerely try the next thing and it doesn't work out also, because the skills you learn from it, you can take to the next thing or the next thing. Yeah, I mean, growth is only going to come through trying. And I mean, this is CI/CD is the same way, right? Like iterative design is about failing fast so that you can fix things and take the things that worked and make those better. Your life's the same way. Like live iteratively.
So that's a great takeaway for sure. I love that. So yeah, I think when oftentimes, especially younger generations these days, from what I'm seeing, there's a sense that there's no loyalty from employers, and folks are more apt to do what's best for them and their family. So I think the younger generations actually have a pretty good sense of if things aren't going right, we need to adjust. But how do you temper that? How do you ensure that you have given whatever you're doing a fair shake? And you've put in your time to understand if it's truly something that you're averse to. How do you make that determination before you move on to the next thing?
It's a really good question. I don't really know the answer. I know the answer for me, which is it's a gut feeling. Like I can tell when I'm giving up versus when I'm accepting that I've really tried and it's not the right path. as an example, I went to Hawaii on vacation a while back, and I wanted to learn how to surf. And I got a 2-hour surf lesson. I know this feels like it's going nowhere, but I promise you, there's a point. And after the first hour, without being pushed, without being helped, I got up on the board 3 times in a row and surfed in. And I was very proud of myself and also very done. And I was never going to surf again. And I got off the board and put it on the beach and laid out for an hour because I was done. And how did I know? I'd achieved a modicum of success that felt to me like it wasn't that I couldn't do it. It's really that I was just not enjoying it. And I also realized that I love exercise and I love being in the ocean, but exercising while neti potting is not my favorite. So, there were actual like tangible reasons why I didn't enjoy it that were not just about I keep failing at it. And I think like lawyering was the same way. Like at first it was just hard, right? It's like, I don't understand the language and I don't understand really what I'm doing and I don't really have a ton of clients. But then eventually I was like getting the clients I needed. I had the connections I needed within the attorney community. I was making decent money. And as a solo practitioner, I know everybody thinks lawyers make tons of money. As a solo practitioner, there's not a lot of money in it when you're first starting out. But I was doing all right. But really what I hated was the practice of law. And I could really tell that. It was like I was proficient enough at it to understand that I didn't like it. And I think that that's where the line maybe is. It's like, it's not that I can't do it. It's that I can do it and still hate it. And that's okay. That's okay to then be like, oh, no, I really gave this a good college try and I'm done.
That's a great way to sum it up. Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of time, how long it would take you to feel that proficient. I would imagine, how long were you at it before you had that level of mastery that you felt like you gave it a fair shot?
Yeah, I mean, that was feedback. You getting feedback?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I got a lot of feedback on that one. For me, after 2 years, I knew I was done. Because I didn't want to get up in the morning and go do it. And I was getting new clients. Like I wasn't like struggling to get new clients. I wasn't struggling to pay my bills. I guess that's how I knew that there was at least a level of mastery. I wouldn't say I was a master. Like for 2 years of practice, if you talk to any lawyer who's been in the business for, decades, they'll be like, yeah, you didn't know what you were doing. I'm sure that there's truth to that. But, I knew enough that it wasn't going to make me happy in the long run. I guess I've talked to people in security industry that are like, oh, I've been doing this job for 6 months and I hate it. And I'm like, well, tell me what that means, right? Tell me what job you're doing and why you hate it. And is it you hate it because you really don't like security, or is you hate it because the specific job you're doing is boring? Like, what was it that attracted you to security in the first place? And once you can really suss out, is it just, this is monotonous, or there's no artistry in it, which is something I found in lawyering. There's like, it's a lot of repetition, or it's depressing, or, like there's a million things that could be the impact of, or impacting that decision of hating that thing or not wanting to be successful at it. But if you can really suss out the whys, then you can then figure out, oh, is it that I want to leave security? Or is it something else is interesting me more? Or is it, I want to just leave this particular, I want to stop being a SOC analyst, right? And I want to start doing pen testing instead. So.
Yeah, that's the example I was actually thinking of. What do you say to that SOC analyst who's been in it for 6 months and they're like, well, this is the same thing over and over, day after day. And I'm just tired of it. They don't have that intellectual stimulation. I would say you figure out why it is, like you said, find the why behind everything, dig a little deeper, try and pick apart why you hate it. And then once you have that, figure out if there's a solution to it. Maybe talk to somebody who's been in your position before, who worked their way up through the SOC, and ask them, at what point did it start sucking less?
Yes. Yes, 100%. And also look at the person who's at the next level from you and see what they're doing and start working on some of that. Like you can grow your career without being told, right? You don't have to wait until somebody promotes you. And in fact, if you don't wait until somebody promotes you, you'll get promoted more swiftly because you've realized that you've achieved the level of expertise you need for the role you're in. Now start achieving to the next role, and you'll suddenly start doing it. And oh my God, there you are, and you're promoted into that, if that's what interests you. But I do agree, like informational interviews are great. And like I said, there's so many roles in security, everything from like the governance and risk and compliance aspect, all the way through very technical and, pen testing and or AppSec or like there's so many roles. Like you can find something in security potentially if that's what interests you. And you can always pivot.
Absolutely. So we kind of talked about if somebody is looking for a promotion or looking for a career change, what to do as sort of the candidate in that scenario. What about from a hiring perspective? Because that's kind of a lot of what this podcast is all about. How do you determine who's ready for a promotion, who's ready for that next step? I would imagine you probably align it to the goals that you had set out previously when you first onboarded that person.
The way I can tell that they're ready for a promotion is that they're already half doing the role they want to be promoted into. They might not be competent at half doing that role, but the fact that they're striving for it to me is like, oh, okay, here you go. I had one person that I was promoting every 6 months because he just kept striving for the next level. As soon as he was in the new level, he was like, "Oh, okay, this is what I've learned. This is what I've, and I can now automate some of this stuff, and I can teach it to somebody else, and I can fill the spaces that I've emptied now by growing." And then, like the last cycle before I left, I didn't promote him. And I had a conversation with him and I was like, the reason you're not promoted this time is because you're finally at the level you need to be at. Like this is a good growth space for you. And I think you could be promoted in the next 6 months potentially, but you're now at a place where stuff's a little hard for you. And that's a good place to be. And I think that to show to other people that you're ready for promotion is not about like I've been in this role forever and so it's time to promote me. It's I've become such an expert at this role that it's half of my workday, and the other half of my workday I'm actually already doing some of the next level up or the next role that I want to be doing, or I've been doing it at home and look at what I can do. So I think that that's how you can tell.
That makes sense. What do you say to the person that they want to do all that stuff? They want to take on more responsibility, but maybe their manager doesn't feel they're ready for that extra responsibility. How would they go about getting some of that stuff on their plate to prove themselves?
Everybody always feels busy. Almost everybody always feels busy at work. Find the person who's doing the job you want to do and take some stuff off their plate. I'm like, honestly, like that is the best way to get promoted. Start doing the job you want to be doing, and also get the stuff you're supposed to be doing done. Like, don't leave your work untouched, but start doing the job you want to be doing, and you will get promoted into it. It's really, really as simple as that. There's also a saying that's like, if you want to have something done, give it to a busy person. I know for me, if I'm less busy, I'm also less engaged. The busier I am, the more work I'll do. And the more excited I am to get work done. If I only have 5 things on my to-do list, I might procrastinate them until they really, really have to be done, or maybe a little bit after. And it's just, I think that that's human nature, is like, the busier we are, the busier we want to be. And if you really want to grow and you really want to get to the next level, you will find space in your day to add more things, and people will notice. People will notice that, oh, give it to Hadas. She always gets things done.
Yeah, and you almost kind of mentioned the idea of flow state. Once you're in a flow state, you can take on more responsibility than if you weren't in a flow state, because you're just so much more efficient and you're in tune with the things that need to be done. So we've talked a lot about promotions and motivation and stuff like that. What about some of the challenges that you've encountered over the years as a hiring manager in CISO. Are there any that popped up on more than one occasion that you could kind of outline?
Um, Ask me that again with more specificity. Whose challenges? My own? Other people's? Like, what are you asking about?
Yeah, so just getting good people on board, whether it's early on in the recruiting process, recruiters not bringing you the right candidates, or whether it's further on, couldn't get people
Yeah.
past the interview stage and with the signed offer, that sort of thing.
I have a great answer now that I understand. I think my biggest challenge, and it's gotten better through the years, but it still is a challenge at times, is because I've worked mostly at from seed to scale size companies. It's harder to onboard people who are not self driven. And it's harder to get them to that state. So when I hire somebody, usually it's a very small headcount that I have. And so they have to be able to like roll up their sleeves and hit the ground running and not be afraid to do things wrong and fail, because we can correct failure, but I can't like force you to get work done. And I have hired people mistakenly thinking that that's the person they are, and finding out that they're really more apt to being told, "Hey, I need you to do this, then this, then this, then this." And so it's a challenge to figure out, because everybody thinks they're self-driven. It's a challenge to figure out the personality type that will be successful at a more what is the word I'm looking for? Amorphous role. I'm getting better at that. Getting better at also teaching people how to become that person, because I think I think for some people it's innate, but I think it's something you can teach somebody. But you need to have a pretty stable org already if you're teaching somebody how to just like take chances. I will also say that in security and people who are security engineers, sometimes taking chances is not a characteristic of security engineers. So teaching them how to do that and feel comfortable with it is something that's a challenge also. But I would say that my biggest hiring faux pas have been hiring people who just don't have that that comfort level, and then not quite knowing how to get them there. And so I feel badly because they were wonderful people, wonderful engineers, but they just didn't work in that environment. And I hate hiring somebody and not being able to keep them. And so I'm just more careful, I think, now. I'm very much of the dogma of hire slowly and fire fast. Yeah, I think that that's probably my biggest mistake, difficulty.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it is very difficult to suss out motivation of somebody, and what motivates them when you're first talking to somebody in an interview process. Understanding if they have that self motivation, if they have an internal versus external locus of control. That's kind of a deeper idea. That's not necessarily something that somebody shares.
Or that they really understand about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like if I were to say to you, Peter, you self-driven and self-motivated, you'd say yes. And I'm not saying you're not. You probably are. From what you've said, from all the career changes and now owning your own business and doing your own thing, you obviously are. But I think like figuring out as an interviewer and as a hirer how to get the correct answer, like the true answer from somebody about how they are self-motivated, because everybody has self-motivation, but like how to really and to be able to trigger their self-motivation and self-drive as their manager. It's complicated.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, it was very much I could share with an interviewer, well, here's examples of things that I've done previously that show my self motivation, but Some folks might not have those examples. I think often the default in this respect is for hiring managers to default to, did they work in a similar environment? So if it's a startup environment, they're looking for people that have worked in other startup environments.
Yeah.
Or if it's a SaaS company, this is very specific that I've had happen. They're looking for people that have come from a certain stage SaaS company, this exact same type of company. And that's their proxy for, is this person going to be a fit for our environment?
The problem with that, though, is that you're not giving other people opportunity. And also, you're hiring people who've done that before. And so they might not be as motivated because it might not be as much of a challenge for them. I think one of the things that I learned is trying to figure out if somebody has an entrepreneurial spirit in anything that they've done. And I think that that kind of helps, because it's like, if you've started your own business, or if you started your own side hustle or whatever, like things like that can help figure out if you have that self-motivation, self-drive. But I feel like sometimes companies get blinded by hiring people who have done this before, and they might not get the level of talent that they can. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and actually, I'm looking for a job right now. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who was like looking for a job as well. And he's like, oh yeah, I applied to this one company, but they're only looking for CISOs who've been at Fortune 500s. And I was like, that is a ridiculous, I get why they're saying that, but it's like, as somebody who's worked at only seed company through startups, I worked at Nike for a hot second, but not in a I was a program manager, so not in this huge leadership role. But as somebody who's worked as head of security in only seed companies up to scale up companies, I know how to create lean, autonomous, engaged teams, and how to manage tight budgets. And these are things that do you think a Fortune 500 isn't interested in those aspects? They want somebody who's a spendthrift? I don't think so. I've had to do a lot with a little. And for a company to just be like, well, if you haven't led a Fortune 500 security team, then we don't want you. It just seems so, I don't know. It's closed-minded to me. But whatever. I don't want to work at a Fortune 500 anyway. I should probably have you edit that last part out.
No worries. Yeah, I think it all boils down to narrow-minded hiring being the cause of the talent gap. Nobody considers transferable skills. Everybody wants to hire from a direct competitor or an extremely similar environment. People are looking for that zone of proximal development. They're not looking for a complete lateral move in terms of title, responsibilities, compensation, all of the above. They need something to keep them engaged, or especially at least the folks that are highly intelligent, highly self-motivated and stuff like that. They're always looking for that next thing. And I
just feel like if you find somebody who is motivated, and it is a proximal development area for them, you're going to actually find somebody who's much more motivated to succeed and to try new things and to get a lot done with a very little. Because, when I walked into my first security leadership role, I probably after the first month, I was like, I called up some of my friends in the CISO community, and I was just like, I'm having severe imposter syndrome. I don't know if I can accomplish this. And one of my friends sat me down, and they're like, all right, tell me all the problems that the company has. And I listed them out, and he's like, okay, tell me the solutions and what your priorities are. And I listed them all out. And he's like, yeah, you're doing everything right. Don't worry about it. I was just like, really? He's like, yeah, you figured out what your priorities are. You figured out what your budget is. You figured out what your head count is and who can do what already. And this is only I think by then I was 2 months in. He's like, this is only 60 days in. You're doing great. Just keep going, keep driving. And if you get into any real issues, then contact me and I'll help you out. But it's just it was a real stretch for me. But that makes it challenging and interesting and makes me want to be successful. And I think that most people are like that. So it's okay to hire a little beneath the role. Just a little. Let your people grow.
I agree. And it seems like the way you were describing that situation, you were experiencing anxiety. There's sort of an unknown cloud around you, and you don't know how it's going to, all play out. And I've listened to some podcasts. I'm always doing so. But
Me too.
Physiologically, there's not much difference between excitement and anxiety. They both present the same way. You get, quicker beating heart, pulse, you feel flushed, stuff like that. So physiologically, there's very little difference between the two. And it's really all about framing how you feel that you're feeling.
Ooh,
kind of goes
NLP, baby. I love that. Yeah, reframe what you're feeling. I don't know if you know neurolinguistic programming. I love it. I think that I think it's very powerful to reframe a situation. So I love that. I'm going to take that and put it in my back pocket and keep it with me. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming up on time here, Hadas. Just one last question for you. What are we not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
Let me think on that. I'd like to actually flip the question if I could. I think, and this might be a spicy take, I think something we're talking too much about and shouldn't be is, I don't want to do this. I'm going to get myself in trouble. I'm going to say it and we'll see if I want to keep it. I think instead of saying what we're not talking about that we should be, because I think we're talking about a lot of things. I think something that we're talking maybe a little too much about is specific parity, diversity. As a woman in engineering and in tech and in leadership, I know that there aren't a lot of women in tech leadership roles. But also having been in the legal field as a woman, I want to say that I think we may be misdefining a quote unquote problem. When women want to go into a field and dominate it, they do. Women now, there are more women teachers than men teachers, and that didn't used to be true. There are now more women doctors and in the medical field than there are men. There are now more women attorneys than there are men. And I really think that there would be more women leadership engineering roles than men if that was what women wanted. I think the women that want it do it. And I think that by trying to get parity, just for the sake of parity, just to say there's 50-50, isn't necessarily the path to getting more women into STEM, into engineering. I do think that we can make any industry feel like there's more belonging in it for people, and make sure that people feel valued, and all people feel valued, and that could help grow the amount of women in engineering. But I think that just saying, hey, we have to have 50% women in charge of engineering is not necessarily going to get us there. And I would like to hear less of that and more about just like making sure everybody feels heard and seen, and making it a comfortable environment if that's what people want to be in. Yeah. I don't know if I said that right.
No, that makes sense. I tend to hold many of the same views, actually. So
I'm going to get myself in trouble for that, but you can keep it in. Go ahead and edit out all of the hemming and hawing.
Let Steve know. Well, appreciate your time, Hadas. If folks want to get a hold of you, find you online, what's the best way to do so?
My LinkedIn profile is probably the best way. It's Hadas Kasorla. It's very easy to find. And I'm a little lax on responding to especially cold call sales. But other people, you're welcome to reach out to me. I make sure to answer my messages, and I accept connections on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Hadas. And
thanks, Pete. It was a pleasure.
All right. Pleasure as well. Thanks.